Engi is what Cabaret Voltaire was to Zurich, a little bit over 100 years ago. So it's sort of our Cabaret Voltaire. Well, Reptilicus was founded in mid-December 1988. We really didn't know each other. I had seen Johan in some other bands around at the same time in the independent scene. And actually we just met in this club downtown Reykjavík where there was a big concert going on. And we just started talking, and I shared sort of a programming studio with my equipment also in the center. And so I invited Johan, and we just immediately did some recordings and sampling and stuff. Johan had a big collection of 8mm films, was really into sort of B-movies and science fiction and stuff like this, and he suggested that we would use the title of a Danish-American B-movie from the 60s, Reptilicus, which we decided to do, and then we just did our first concert already in the beginning of January, and it just sort of went onwards from that. There was really almost nothing electronic going on at all. So we stood apart. We were using samplers and we had an Atari and a few synths and stuff. So we stood out. The first time we played, people really didn't know what to make of these guys with computers and stuff on stage. When we started out in the 80s, Iceland was not the same place. It was not as vibrant. And I'm not saying that Iceland necessarily lives up to the myth that goes about. But still, it's a much more vibrant place today than it was at that time. So for us, when we started, it was more like an escape. It was really a very small, simple society. Until recently, there had just been like one TV station and one radio station, and people would just talk about sheep farming and fishing or something on the radio. And when I grew up, and I just thought, oh my God, I will have to, live in this, in this place. So for me, at least, doing music was an escape from that. So I never saw nature or Iceland particularly as an inspiration. I was taken with bands and electronic musicians I heard from abroad. The industrial scene in UK, Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire and also the American scene, Skinny Puppy and these kind of people. So for me, it was an escape. Having said that, after having moved abroad myself and then come back, sort of moved back to the country, I lived in Denmark where every square feet is cultivated. I came to sort of appreciate the rawness of the Icelandic nature. So if you leave Reykjavík, you will just have these huge empty spaces, and that's something I came to appreciate sort of after I moved back. But I don't think this was really an inspiration for our music now. What's happening with Reptilicus right now is that we are working on an almost complete reissue of all our stuff. So Artifact will be putting out some of our albums on vinyl, and then a complete sort of CD package. We're quite excited about that, yeah.
If you listen to our music, you can see and hear the nature. We field recording a lot in our music, and so you can hear bird sounds, waterfalls, ocean. It's our main influence. Icelandic nature, I think, yeah. Our music is like organic soundscapes, organic electronica, ambient, yeah, down-tempo beats. When I started in the music scene in Iceland, I came from the hip-hop music, Icelandic hip-hop, and I started produce beats for Icelandic rappers, and 5 years later, something like that, I started work with my father, Óskar Thórarinsson. He's one of the first electronic musicians in Iceland. In the 80s, late 80s, when he was in this band called Inferno 5, and they worked a lot with Reptilicus. It was basically two bands in the 80s in Reykjavík that was doing electronica experimental music. It was Reptilicus and Inferno 5. In 2007, we started working in this project called Hypnosis. You know, people was really surprised. Whoa, this is really unique. And it's sometimes really hard, you know. The scene is growing, and it's quite big now. And I'm also organizer of Extreme Chill Festival in Iceland. It's one of the first electronic festival in Iceland. A lot of things have changed. We have now more tourists coming. You know, back in 2007, it was nobody here. It was really isolated. It was just Icelanders on the streets.
When I make music, I don't get inspired by the nature. It is true that Reykjavík is a small little fishing village where you can see both the ocean and mountains, which is maybe rare. But as an inspiration, I don't especially draw from the nature per se. I started making noise music on top of my poetry about 10 years ago, and I called the project AMFJ. Back then it started out being a power electronics project, basically noise with a lot of yelling and screaming, distorted. But as time went on, I didn't continue staying that angry. So I just lost interest in singing then in this project. So now I'm just making noisy techno or ambient or stuff like that. I use a combination of both hardware and software. I usually start out making everything in a software program. After I'm done with that, I hook that into some hardware. I don't want to get hooked up on some specific hardware or some specific gear. If I am walking somewhere and I get an idea for a beat or a line, I will record it on my phone and then just use that if it works. So my writing or composition technique is just based on speed and just get it out as fast as possible. There is a small legacy of this type of music here. I mean, there are bands like Reptilicus and Guts and others that have been doing this for decades. But in the larger scheme of the Icelandic scene, I would say that me and along with Reptilicus and Guts and all of those are an anomaly.